Everyone's in
Okay,
that was in the
awesome.
waiting room. Yes.
Well, then I will start. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who has come this evening. This is the Brookhaven Comprehensive Plan and meeting, and we are excited for you to be here. I do want to introduce I'm Linda Abray. I'm the Director of Community Development, and wanted to do a quick introduction of my team. We have Senior Planner Drew Murray on, and Planner 2 Samantha Trust. I think she's having some camera issues. And we also have Rhonda Smith, who's not with us this evening. But if you have any questions or you need anything after this meeting, we are always available, and we will do our best to answer any questions tonight. At this point, I'll turn it over to Amanda Hatton with Blue Ciphers.
Hey, thank you, Linda. And again, to reiterate Linda's comments, thanks to you all for being here tonight. This is a really important juncture in the process of updating your comprehensive plan. And so we appreciate your being here and providing input. Tonight, we have an hour and a half, so we have a lot to cover. We want you to know that hopefully some of y'all participated in our first round of meetings or our survey back in October. Today, we've spent the time between October and December digesting all the input we collected, comparing it to existing plans y'all have, as well as data and analysis that we did early on in the planning effort. And we have updated essentially the framework of your comprehensive plan. And so tonight is probably about 70% of us sharing what we've heard, how it has impacted the update to the plan to date. And then about 30% of the meeting is really focused on collecting input from y'all to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. And we want to make sure you understand some of the key changes or refinements that we're making to your comprehensive plan. And so you're seeing the schedule here. We're going to spend about 15 more minutes giving a project update, what we've heard. We'll spend about 30 minutes in the same group covering priorities, which will have some interactive polling during that period. And then we'll break out into breakout groups, and we'll finish, depending on the number of people, we may stay in one, or we may break out into two, and then we'll finish up after that discussion. And we do plan to end right at 8. So we'll hope you're able to stay on for that full time. And I think we skipped one slide. Anyway, we wanted to make sure that everyone knows that you're muted for now. And so we are going to be using a polling app. So we ask if you have an extra browser or have your phone available, you should be able to use that to do the polling during this first portion of the meeting. But we do want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to talk during the discussion. While we're in this muted period, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. Lastly, we do want to make sure, remind everyone that these are our neighbors and fellow members of the Brookhaven community. So please be respectful of other people's ideas and give everyone an opportunity to speak, especially in the breakout rooms. And Ansley, I may have you go back. I'm not sure. I'm out of order a little bit. So Linda introduced the staff from the City of Brookhaven, who we're working very closely with. They're keeping us online and making sure we get the city's comprehensive plan to where it needs to be. But of course, you've got our consultant team here that's with you today. I'm the project manager with Blue Cypress. I also have 2 of my colleagues, John Noe and Ansley Belton. They're also planners, and they are supporting the plan update. We also are joined by our 2 teaming partners, TSW, Allison Stewart Harris, as well as Anna Baggett. They're both planners. They are leading our land use update to the plan. And that's really the heart of the plan. So listen closely to what they have to say today. We're also joined by Fourth Economy. Fourth Economy specializes in housing and economic development. And so especially with housing, but also having a balanced economy, we're excited to have them on our team and focus on those things. And so you'll hear from Ross Berlin from the Fourth Economy team a little later, and he's joined us today. We do want to, in addition to the team, we want to make sure everyone knows that the comprehensive plan is really built from the bottom up from what's important to the city of Brookhaven to community members. It is not a technical analysis where we're shooting out the right answer and what the city should do. It's really based on your vision, the community's vision for the future of the city. And to that degree, y'all being here again is really important. We are working with the steering committee that we've met with twice. We'll meet with them one more time. They are really making sure we're staying on track. That group represents community members from each of your council districts. We have one of your elected officials on the committee. We also have some developers and the business community, as well as some of your minority population folks that represent those groups on our steering committee. So they've been a really great group in helping guide us along the way. We do want to point out also that the state of Georgia and the Atlanta Regional Commission review your plan. They are vested in making sure we grow sustainably as a state and have smart planning initiatives, and that all of the plans in the region and the state of Georgia are accomplishing certain things. So we want to make sure everyone knows that they're also keeping an eye on what we're doing. All right, so now we're gonna get y'all keyed in on using the polling tool. We're using a tool called Menti. You should be able to snag the QR code off your screen, or it's also should be added to the chat. I think Ainsley or John can add the link there. You can type in this code and it should get you into the polling for tonight's meeting. For some reason it's not working, it's okay. Just put your response in the chat and we'll make sure it's aggregated with everything else that we're collecting. We'll give y'all a minute. I think you can thumbs up if you've logged in. I should note that we are combining the input across the 3 workshops. This is our 3rd and final workshop for December. Each one has covered the same topic, so we're aggregating it. So you're going to see the responses we've had to date as you add your information. And Ansley, if the thumbs up, we can, or I'll let you move when you think we've got everyone logged in. So our first question, we'd like to learn more about you. What's your relationship to the city of Brookhaven? So you'll see several options and you should be able to select more than one. And this helps us kind of understand who's with us tonight and are we hearing from the different voices of the city. So I'm seeing I live in Brookhaven, those numbers go up, as well as I own property. Ansley, what else has been increasing here? Did you note other ones go up?
I visit Brookhaven for shopping, and restaurants may have moved as well. Give it a few more seconds. All right,
All
I think
right.
we're all in.
Okay. Well, it looks like most of y'all live and or own property in the city, so that's great. As we know, it's important to you what happens with the city's future. We did want to pause for a minute just to make sure everyone has a good understanding of what the comprehensive plan is. And so this slide is just highlighting its key purpose and key components. This is not managing your transportation. You have separate transportation plans. This is really an umbrella document that considers all the land use in the city. And have we thought through the different types of park space, housing, jobs, services? Do we have the right space in our city for all of those things? And how do we kind of tie that all together, thinking about other planning efforts that the city has underway? And so this plan really brings a lot of the other planning efforts into focus and making sure they're integrated with your land use plan. So like sustainability plan, your multimodal plan, your equity initiatives, which Ross will allude to a little later. Like we're making sure those are all reflected in the land use plan. And the practical part of this is the plan that directs if your neighbor across the street from you has single family zoning and they decide they want to put townhomes on it, or maybe multifamily or mixed use. This is a plan that would guide city staff or elected officials about whether that changing that zoning category makes sense. So it does have a very practical impact on every single person in the community because it does guide those parcel specific decisions. The other quick thing to point out here is that there is a 5-year work program that helps make sure we're moving in the direction of being able to implement our vision for the future. And we will be talking about priorities later that really drive what those 5-year actions are and how we're prioritizing them. Okay. So on the screen, you're seeing our schedule for the planning process. We're about halfway through. You'll see that the plan is broken up into the planning plan update is broken up into 4 stages. Any of the slashed areas are periods of public input. So I alluded to our October input period earlier, and we took about a month to process what we heard, and we're back here again, focusing on the framework of the update. So these are kind of like the skeleton, and we're going to be building out all the meat around it over the next 2.5 months as we pull the draft plan document together. So we'll be coming back in March with the draft plan for the public to review, as well as an open house, which I think probably slides me into the next slide. We do hope that you'll stay involved after this meeting. If you have neighbors or you run into folks that are concerned about having more park space or land for housing or different priorities, please let them know that they can review materials and provide input online beginning tomorrow afternoon. So we will have a specific page that people can go to kind of review the recording from our meeting and provide input. So we also do encourage you and other community members to come back for the open house for the draft plan in March. Once we get past the open house, there will be a planning commission hearing and a city council hearing so we can transmit the plan to the state. So it's really important that we get input before we get to that point and the plan gets sent off for review and finalization. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ansley to talk about community input and also our vision and goals. If you have questions, I don't see any in the chat, please feel free to add those as we move along, and we'll pause and do our best to answer them.
All right, thanks, Amanda. Like Amanda mentioned, I'm going to be walking through what we've heard today and how that input is shaping the plan framework, our long-term vision statement and goals for future growth and development. And you'll hear some repeated themes today, so it's good. We're hearing a lot from the community about similar topics, but we're also interested in hearing what have we missed. So you'll get those opportunities tonight. In October, like Amanda mentioned earlier, we held 4 workshops, and we also had an online input period. We had a survey open for over a month. We collected a lot of great feedback through that. We have also had a digital input map that's continuously been open. It'll close at the end of the year. That can be found on our Brookhaven 2044 website on the Get Involved page. Then back in October, we also did a pop-up booth at the International Festival. That was a great experience to get out there and talk to many members of Brookhaven's diverse community. We also held a few pop-ups this month. We went to the Latin American Association's Christmas market at the beginning of the month, and we also went over to Light Up Brookhaven at Blackburn. These were really great opportunities to get the word out about these meetings, and maybe some of you heard about it because of that. So it was great to be there and just get a sense of the community and talk to folks about our plan. We've held several stakeholder input activities as well. Amanda touched on that we have a steering committee that's guiding the planning process. We've also spoken to various community leaders, like your elected officials, through interviews. We've held some focus group meetings, such as one with developers, and we've talked to your planning commission. So more of these listening sessions will be held in the next month or 2 as well. So we'll continue hearing from targeted groups to make sure we're having a very well-rounded input process. So through our engagement so far, some of the themes that have risen to the top are that diversity is super important to the city, and making sure that we celebrate and continue uplifting the different groups so that they can prosper in the community. Brookhaven loves its trees and green spaces. These are really important assets that should be preserved. So that'll be something that we talk about throughout the night. We've also heard about investing in key areas that are considered economic engines, such as Beaufort Highway and the area around Choa and Emory, but also investing in each of the neighborhoods that make Brookhaven special and a great place to live. Beaufort Highway was somewhere that came up again and again in the first workshop series, and there have been several concerns expressed about gentrification, both from a housing perspective and a commercial perspective. So we'll be thinking about that and ensuring that we come up with policies to help preserve the culture to the extent possible as new development or redevelopment occurs. Some other themes that have been really prevalent are investing in walkability, bikeability, and access to transit.
Ainsley, before you move forward, there was a question in the chat asking if we can define neighborhood placemaking, and I'll invite you or Allison. I don't know if you want to chime in on this one as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I think for that one, it's really just about what are some of the special characteristics of a neighborhood that people really want to celebrate. Sometimes it's art, it can be nature, it could be streams, it could be historic markers. It's really just anything that really speaks to how your neighborhood sees itself and its character and how it's different from others.
Thanks, Allison. All right, so getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of what we heard about housing, like Amanda mentioned earlier, this has been a major part of the comp plan update, is talking about housing in the community, and affordable housing specifically is something that's been talked about a lot. We've heard about, I'm sorry, one moment. I apologize. Can't get the slide in here.
We have automatic lights at our office and they go off at inopportune times.
Okay, I'm back. So as I was saying, affordable housing is a big priority. And a lot of times when we talk about housing, we have to talk about how we can enable different price points. And doing so is and done a lot of times by encouraging a variety of types of housing. And your zoning code may not allow that throughout the whole city. So that's something the comp plan will help guide. So we'll get into the discussion about that more later on. We've also heard from people about concentrating housing near MARTA and job centers. And like I said, removing different regulatory barriers so that more types of housing can come to the city, and so that we can have creative solutions to address the affordable housing issues. Reiterating what I spoke to earlier, Beaufort Highway has also been a key area of discussion. One of its top needs we heard about was pedestrian safety. We've also heard a lot about everybody loves the culture of the corridor and making sure that that remains viable, making sure that as that redevelopment might occur in some places, that small businesses can continue to thrive and that naturally occurring affordable housing stays affordable. So some ideas we've heard are maybe more small business space could be invested upon in the area. More green space could also be introduced. We've heard about the need for more street connections, and also about the need for a catalyst in order for certain parts of the corridor to redevelop. So I wanted to go a little deeper into what what we heard from our survey and who participated. I mentioned that the survey was open most of October and a little bit of November. We heard from 232 people on our English survey, as well as 3 people on the Spanish survey. We've heard from mainly people 35 and up. You can see the age breakdown here. You can also see the breakdown of the race and ethnicities of those who participated. We have been working really hard to make sure that this plan reflects the needs of the minority populations in Brookhaven, and we're going to continue our efforts. Like I mentioned, we've worked with the Latin American Association, gone to an event there, and we're working to do a focus session, listening session to hear more from the people that live or work along Beaufort Highway. So some of the key stats, I'm not going to go on over every single part of the survey. We don't have time for that tonight, but there will be a full summary posted on our website soon. So you'll be able to peruse the whole thing when that's posted. But for now, I'm going to share some highlights. We asked about the citywide vision statement. I will note this is different than the vision statement for future growth and development that's guiding our comprehensive plan, which is also asked about in the survey, but it's part of our scope of work to update both the citywide vision and mission as well as the land use vision statement for the comprehensive plan. So I hope that's not confusing, but for the citywide vision statement, some of the key terms that have come up are diverse, inclusive, vibrant, walkable, and affordable. Another key question we asked was about what neighborhoods or areas of Brookhaven are most in need of redevelopment. And as you can see here, Beaufort Highway was the majority response. But there was a follow-up question where people specifically said certain nodes should be invested in for redevelopment, not the entire corridor, so that you can still preserve some of the parts of the corridor that make it special.
Ansley, while we're on that note, there was a question, how does preventing, this is from an earlier slide, but I think it relates to what you just said. How does preventing gentrification on Beaufort Highway relate to needing a catalyst for redevelopment? And so I'm going to take a first shot at that, and I might let TSW chime in as the land use lead. I think one thing we've uncovered, as Ansley was just speaking to, is that there's kind of a need to preserve some areas of Beaufort Highway and some characteristics of Beaufort Highway, but also we do want reinvestment and to see new development. And how do we catalyze the development in the areas where we see it's needed? And the city has nodal studies that define that. We've outlined all that in the update to the land use plan. But then how do we preserve some things like naturally occurring affordable housing, or how do we retain some of the diversity of businesses? So there's kind of these two competing demands: diversity of people and businesses, but then also catalyze reinvestment to accommodate more housing or more services. And Allison, Anna, I don't know if y'all want to add anything to that.
Yeah, or Ross can chime in as well. But yeah, I think that covers it. We do think that there's a lot of opportunity to make sure that some of that housing that's there can stay there and remain affordable. But like Amanda said, there are a couple of specific locations that have been targeted for redevelopment. And it's a balance, right? Anytime you redevelop, it's, the chances are that the property values are going to go up, and we realize that. But we do think there's an opportunity for both things to coexist because it's a fairly large corridor.
Okay. I see nods from Ross. So to keep the meeting moving, I do want to highlight this one other question. And Ansley, I think if you've seen it here from Chad, do you have any info on how representative this breakdown of respondents is or is not of the residents of Brookhaven?
Sure, I'll chime in on that. So looking at this racial breakdown, it actually does almost line up with your community breakdown of in terms of how many, from a race perspective, 65% of the population of Brookhaven is white. 12% is Black, African American. And we didn't hear from as many Hispanic, Latino, as the census says it's about 18% of the population, and then we had 5% here. So that is, like I said, one group that we haven't been hearing as much from. All right, I will move us forward. So we've taken all of this great input so far and worked on workshopping the land use vision statement that really guides the entire comprehensive plan. We're going to be focusing on how this filters down into goals and priorities later on tonight. But I wanted to present here, what's on the left is what was the land use vision statement in your last comprehensive plan update that was done in 2019. And how we're working on revising that. So we've taken the inputs from all of these stakeholder interactions and the online survey, the workshops and the pop-ups that we've done. Some of the key things we've heard are that Brookhaven doesn't care as much about being a national model. It's more important that we're serving the folks that live here in the community. So we've heard to take that word out. Some other key themes, like I said, walkability and transit-oriented development have come up a lot, as well as emphasizing the city's diversity. So with that, we have our draft new vision statement to present here tonight, and we're going to be asking for your input on this in a moment, but I'll give you an opportunity to review here. Like I said, diversity is such a huge part of the city that we put that up front right in the beginning. We've discussed striving for fiscal, social, and environmental stewardship of our land to really speak to the input we've heard about being both sustainable from an environmental perspective, but also an economic and social perspective. And then also making sure that we enjoy our vibrant, attainable, and well-connected neighborhoods and activity hubs. So at this point, I will move to our next poll. We just want to hear from you. How are we doing with this vision statement? Is it looking good? You think it's getting there but needs some adjustment? And if so, please feel free to put some ideas in the chat. And also you can let us know if it really needs attention. And the statement is also still here for you to review.
I'll chime in that it's complicated updating vision statements, writing vision statements. If you are in the yellow or red area and you feel comfortable sharing any feedback on why you selected that, that would help us out. Or you can email us after the meeting too.
Everyone, another minute or so. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and move on.
So Ansley, I'll just point out the one comment, something about the syntax of the vision statement is off. Okay, well, thank you. This is something we're bringing back to the steering committee. So we'll be sharing all the feedback we've gotten. And so hopefully they can help us a little bit with that specific need. And I see you mentioned walkability. I'd suggest finding a way to bring that specific word in. And I think well-connected is intended as a proxy, but would prefer walkable. Okay, that's helpful. And then last comment, I think some of the words are not clear enough. It might be confusing, like attainable. Yes. So we are showing you the shell, I keep saying the framework of the plan, because we do it like plan to explain a couple of these keywords if we leave them in there and what we mean by them, because we realize they may have different meanings for different people. Okay. And then Michael, thank you. Feels like buzzword bingo. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for this feedback. This is helpful to us.
Okay. Well, I finally wanted to show also in tandem with the vision statement are several long-term goal areas that will be fleshed out more in the actual plan document, but I just wanted to show what are the main topics that have come to the top when we've heard, from various different stakeholders and the public. And a lot of these have carried over from your last plan update. A lot of them are very relevant still, and we want to make sure that we're not starting from scratch. We're just updating your plan. So we have tweaked some things like multicultural hub is a replacement. It used to just say diversity. Parks and paths. We added the and paths due to the significance of the Peachtree Creek Greenway. We've added innovative to the innovative and sustainable one. And we've been talking about what these mean with our steering committee and continuing to flesh that out some. So you'll see more guidance in the actual plan document if you come back and visit our open houses in March. With that, I will go ahead and pass it on to Amanda, who's going to go into our short-term priorities.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to just note real quick, thank you, Kim, for the note about Kimberly, the note about appreciate more specific language. I think, yes, the plan document will have more specific language to help all the actions, the policies really feed back into these high level things that the vision and goals statement. So we want to keep things simple, but also have more details behind it and substance behind it. So if we miss that in the draft plan, hopefully come back and read it and see the detail. Certainly that's why we're coming back in March. And I also see a note about unique Brookhaven could be either very good or very bad, kind of an open-ended statement. Yes, and I think fleshing out more what we need by that in the plan, you'll expect to see that. So hopefully we're kind of pointing in the direction you would hope the unique Brookhaven, what that means. All right, so we're a little behind on time, so I'm going to try to go a little quicker here so we have plenty of time, again, to get to the heart of the plan, the land use updates that we've been making. So essentially, we have been, since day one, thinking about what are the priority needs and opportunities for the short term, the next 5 years. What are things we need to move forward? This is something you have in your current 2019 plan. It's something that's required by the state. It drives that 5-year work program that we talked about. And so in the current plan, you have kind of a housing section, a land use section, like what are we doing in land use? What are we doing in economic development? We have reorganized them by themes because a lot of the needs and opportunities are cross-disciplinary. They may require some help from economic development and also your community development department. They may be things that involve your communications. And so these are the 5 themes, hopefully you've been looking at them, that we're gonna walk through these 5 bucket areas, where we've organized priority needs or opportunities. For each need or opportunity we go through, which we're gonna do relatively quickly so we can get to the land use, is going to have actions or policies behind it within the plan document. Again, this is a framework of the plan, so we're not able to get into all the weeds of it today. So our first area is strategic growth, and what we're talking about here is encouraging development areas best suited to accommodate growth. And so a couple things I want to point out on this slide, and hopefully y'all are kind of skim through the rest while I'm talking, is establishing a guiding citywide economic development strategy. That's something that y'all have had in your work program since your inaugural 2014 plan. Again, we're happy to have Fourth Economy on, very focused on economic development. This is something that we've identified the city really needs a separate document to make sure, again, we have that balanced tax base in our community. The other thing that Ansley alluded to earlier that I want to point out is the key economic engine area. So these are modified priorities. So really thinking about the Beaufort Highway corridor, the city center area along Peachtree Road, as well as the Briar Hills Innovation District, which again is the Choate and Emory campuses on the other side of 85. Those are really where we see a lot of the new growth and development happening, and they're also really important to the city's economic future. The last thing I'll note here is as we are strategically growing, we really need to be thinking about the infrastructure from a roadway standpoint, as well as stormwater is the other infrastructure element that the city has influence over and manages. Of course, we want to work with the CAB on there, make sure we've got water and sewer capacity. I'm seeing some notes in here. I probably don't have time to cover them all, but we'll see if at the end we can come back to some of them, but we appreciate the feedback. A couple new priorities that we've identified is expanding public gathering spaces in underserved areas, and then advancing live work opportunities within Brookhaven. I think we'll come back to this with Ross's comments here in a minute. But when we're talking about live work, we want people to be able to both live and work in the city, again, to further that walkability that someone was alluding to earlier, and making it so we can, people that are working at this major new investment in the hospital on the Choa campus, that they can also live here. And so maybe there's walking and transit use. We're leveraging the location for people to live and making sure we've got more housing options, which we spoke about earlier. So this slide that we'd like some feedback on is which special areas do you feel would benefit from more planning to ensure that they grow in a desired fashion? So within the refinement to the land use plan, we've identified these unique areas that are a little different, and they maybe already have a small area plan, but they require special attention. So we'd like to find out from you all where you think, if and which of these you feel would benefit from more focused attention by the city, or potentially more focused investment. While y'all are answering, I'm going to look at, I see there's a question. Where can we view updates for specific city properties, like the recently acquired Morrison property on Osborne? Linda, do you want to, is Linda still on?
I am. We don't have any updates on anything with Morrison Farms at this time.
Okay, but if somebody has a question about any of the city property, they can reach out to y'all in community development, or y'all can direct them for answers.
Yeah, I would say I will assume that if the city has anything, we would put out a press release or have it on our website, but you're always welcome to reach out to us. There's just nothing at this time that I have any information on.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Linda. So Ansley, if you were keeping an eye on the numbers that changed, do you want to chime in where we got some input from the group tonight?
Yeah, I'd say Beaufort Highway and Peachtree Road continue to be the top answers to this one.
Right. Well, thanks for y'all's input. I'm going to hand it over to Ross to cover our next priority bucket area.
Yeah, thanks. I think when we think about equitable development and investment, we're kind of combining things like housing, economic development, and also community development to think about what does it mean for Brookhaven to be a place that is accessible for people to live, attainable for people to live, and also welcoming to a variety of people, regardless of age, things like race or other sort of background and characteristics. So the city's been sort of firming up its commitment to social justice, race, and equity as of 2020, and from the previous comp plan, and now moving forward, there's a variety of priorities that play into this. If you could go to the next slide, some of the sides on the economy side or the economic development side revolve around a topic we were talking about a bit earlier, commercial gentrification. I think that's really the new priority we've identified at this time, is to think about, as the city does redevelop in its built environment, what does it look like to make sure that current existing businesses that are such a part of the cultural landscape of Brookhaven are, have the means to stay in the city and have those sorts of resources. And then also on top of that, just more general support for the business community, small businesses, and also entrepreneurship in terms of the startup scene that does exist in Brookhaven. Shifting gears a bit to talk a bit more about housing. We have a ton more data that this final plan is going to provide on housing. This is really just kind of top line a few points that we've been hearing from our analysis and also the interviews we've been conducting throughout the community. I think really it's important to flat out see that homeownership in Brookhaven is less attainable than it is on average, both in Georgia and in the country. That's not necessarily surprising because Brookhaven is so adjacent to the city of Atlanta and is such a key part of the metro area that it is in-town living, for lack of a better way of describing it, and that does come with a market price. And regionally, prices have also been rising really for the past decade. This is a pretty hot topic across the metro. I'm sure if you read the newspaper, the news, that it's something that you see. But Brookhaven's interesting because with major employers coming in, there really is a desire for people to live and work in Brookhaven. And we do have some data on live, work in the city that will be part of that final plan. But I think it's really something that employers are prioritizing, and also just people are seeking in their lifestyle in general nowadays, especially since the 2020 pandemic. If you go to the next slide, I think a few things that we really want to make sure we involve in the space of planning for housing in Brookhaven is thinking about lifelong communities that from kids growing up to people who are looking to buy their first home and live near their work, or for senior living, we want to make sure that Brookhaven continues to be comfortable and attainable, like we said. And then on top of that, specifically for workers and workforce housing, we want to make sure it exists and again is affordable and attainable and also safe and accessible. And really, I think one of our big ethos, kind of how we're thinking about it moving forward, is that those sorts of things are attainable with specific sort of actions and policies and decision-making frameworks that allow for multiple housing types and price points. And that's something that exists from zoning to how people who are involved in city and even regional politics think about housing. So that's a pretty multifaceted issue, but it's definitely something we're prioritizing and we've been hearing pretty consistently throughout this planning process. The way we ultimately will be planning for housing is perhaps a bit different than some of the other areas. We're going to be doing this at very small areas. I think we recognize pretty quickly in our planning process that what the northern parts of Brookhaven look like are very different than what the area under 85 or on Peachtree Road looks like. So we really are going to want to do that very small area sort of planning for housing to make sure that strategies and action items meet the needs of very specific areas and corridors, because I think it would be a disservice to the city to just provide, one housing strategy for everything. But at the same time, we do still want to make sure that the city and its community development department are equipped with kind of overall citywide housing ideas and policies that are implementable and could really help in those small areas and also at a citywide level. So we'll want to make sure we take that approach that both looks at the nitty gritty and then also the more macro level of the city as a whole. And I think we're curious to gather a little feedback. You can see what we've already had to date on essentially when we think about non-single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, things that are already in Brookhaven. When you drive through the city, they're pretty hard to miss. We're curious, when you think about potentially more of those coming to the city, what do you want them to be near? What sort of proximity are you interested in? Because, we can think about proximity to transit centers, job centers, proximity to existing housing of that type, and also mixed use centers and recreation. And there's plenty of considerations also in a more technical zoning perspective that my friends at TSW would probably be better to talk about than I would. But we appreciate the feedback on what we have here, and there's plenty more criteria than this, but these are just a few we wanted to share. And I'm happy to see so many people involved. And Ansley, I'm not sure if you've noticed anything specific as answers have come in, but.
Yeah, I think distance from transit has gotten a few votes, as well as proximity to other mixed use centers like services and recreational amenities.
Awesome. Well, again, we do appreciate the feedback, and this is it's a multifaceted, complex issue, and there's plenty more information where that came from, but we appreciate y'all kind of hearing and vetting this for the time being. And if you have feedback, please feel free to put it in the chat. But I think for the sake of time, we can move on to Anna and arts and culture.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. So since its formation, the city of Brookhaven has been around for a little over 10 years now. But since its formation, one of its main priorities was to better define a sense of place and identity, kind of what we were talking about at that neighborhood scale, but on a city level as well. To this end, so far, they've conducted an arts and culture strategic plan to really kind of focus in on that sector of creative placemaking. As well as, the city center master plan for Peachtree Road has a significant art component to it. So those are a couple of the planning efforts related to placemaking that have been done so far. Could you go back real quick? Part of our process, and I guess, in revising these priorities, we're really focusing on celebrating and furthering Brookhaven's culture and sense of place rather than like, let's keep creating this. It's there. It's been worked on. And you can see, if you look closely at this map on the right, we've documented some different places within the city, some arts, history, and cultural points of interest as a part of this process. Next slide. So some of the priorities from the previous plan that we're carrying over, establishing that town center. That's something that was a big priority in the city center master plan along Peachtree Road. And then also completing a strategic wayfinding and branding study, another way to further that Brookhaven brand. Some new priorities that we've added, support and celebrate and promote that city diversity that Ansley was talking about through arts and cultural initiatives. Also strengthen and increase Brookhaven's cultural spaces and facilities. So not just, through art, but also through space where we can, celebrate the unique parts of Brookhaven. And then finally, recognize and cultivate the many international cultures that contribute to the vibrancy of Brookhaven. Next slide. So here we're asking about different types of creative placemaking initiatives that you think the city of Brookhaven should pursue or keep investing in. I think on your Mentimeter, it should list those options. Okay. So community gardens is so far in the lead. Signage is another important one. Wayfinding on trails. Oh, community gardens keep going. And then another important one is gathering spaces that foster a sense of place and reflect historical and ethnic character of communities. Okay. Give you another second. And then here we just have kind of a catch-all. Is there anything we're missing? Is there anything the city of Brookhaven should really look at to invest in for their arts and culture initiatives?
I
So
think
right
for
now
the sake of time, if you have other ideas, you can add them to the chat, but we'll go ahead and, oh, this is a good one. How about reviving the theater at Oglethorpe?
Yeah, that is a good
So
one.
thanks
Thank you
for
for
the
that one.
feedback.
I was watching the chat because I think we had an important note that Ross thumbed up that we heard you about the zoning rewrite and to be really careful that we're about what we're saying with some of the policies we're writing, especially related to housing. So thank you for that. Helpful to have that pointed out. So the last two areas that we're going to cover are sustainability and then connectivity and active transportation. So Ansley already did a great job of speaking to the input we've heard on the importance of not only furthering a healthy and resilient natural environment, but also a built environment. So you're seeing carryover priorities from the 2019 plan. We did hear in our first round of meetings about the importance of the CREEP system, both as a something we can leverage for investment, but also something that we need to be careful to protect. And encouraging sustainable development is another thing. And health and exercise has always been a really important part of the city since day one. And so with CHOA and Emory investing in the city, and again, that ongoing commitment to walkability and wanting to be able to get around different ways, this is something you'll see some additional actions and initiatives related to this in the plan. On the next slide, you'll see some new things that we identified in our first round of meetings. We did hear about, the city spent a lot of time, we know, on doing their best to get the tree ordinance to a point that is acceptable to developers, but also is doing its best to protect the tree canopy. We did hear about maintaining the tree canopy, and y'all have some great programs that invest in additional trees as well. Another thing I'll just point out here is the promoting green infrastructure investments. As we know that we're expecting more extreme heat events and flooding in the future, just kind of throughout the state of Georgia, building in green infrastructure to combat that, trees, pocket spaces, some of the things we were talking about, for example, on Beaufort Highway, making sure we have good natural spaces for water to flow into are going to be important. And so again, you'll expect to see some investment or some action items related to these and other things on here in the plan. We did want to ask y'all one key question related to sustainability. This is going to take probably a minute for y'all to do, rate the importance of each sustainability action below, the ones that we have listed. And again, we're building off of plans and documents that y'all already have in place. So a lot of things are identified, but to some degree we're prioritizing. The next slide will ask if there's anything else that you didn't see listed here that you want to make sure the city's taking action on. Again, next 5 years is what we're really focused on.
Be sure once you've set all your ratings to submit them so that we'll see your responses. Looks like a few are starting to come in. So far, our top responses are developing pocket parks and underserved areas, and then conserving green space, particularly vulnerable land in the floodplain. All right, I'll move us along.
Yep. So this last question is, what else should we be doing to facilitate sustainability and innovation? And you'll see to some degree, we want to be forward thinking. That's something we have heard from steering committee leaders, and we want to be mindful of in a 20-year plan is where do we want to be on the edge of things or thinking ahead? So to, again, maintain our sustainability and resiliency as a community. So if there's anything at the top of your mind, certainly add that, or again, we'll move forward, but you can put it in the chat. More sidewalks. Okay. All right, which is a perfect transition. So our last priority area is connectivity and active transportation. This is about advancing greater connectivity, safety, and access for all modes of transportation. And so the safety and all modes of transportation, again, are things we've heard repeatedly through the plan update process. You're seeing a couple of things listed here that are in the current 2019 plan, and they will be advancing. On the next slide, you're seeing some new priorities that have come up, working with MARTA and other partners to make transit improvements, including safety enhancements and service improvements. We know this isn't in the city's control, but Brookhaven's an important stakeholder, and we've heard a lot about this. And so how can we move the needle? Looking at policies and infrastructure to support new technology like electrification and automation of vehicles. And right now, one of the things with transportation and sustainability, there's a lot of federal funding, and having things documented in a plan, the city really can access a lot of interesting and useful funding streams to move some of these things forward that don't require the city's resources, but are actually something the government is federal government's investing in. And then again, you're seeing safety on the city's roadways. The last slide, this is really, I think, a good slide to end on, because again, we want to point out that a lot of what we're building into the plan is bits and pieces that tie into land use that are already in other planning documents. And this plan is really pulling those things in. And transportation is really important with land use and making sure we're connecting the two. But we are mindful that you have a transportation plan, you have planned projects. The 2023 multimodal plan, which I believe might be rebranded as 2024, they should align well where we're integrating, make sure we're mindful of those recommendations, what's being recommended in that plan, to make sure it aligns with the land use plan. I see a couple comments in the chat that I want to recognize. The sustainability challenge will be understanding the trade-off among different priorities. Yes. And that's a good challenge we have in coming up with the work program. And yes, I have to take a minute, but we will digest the, the graphic that was provided. Thank you for that. And I believe at that point I can hand us over. We can pause for a minute if there's any questions, and maybe this is in case there's an action you thought that we would talk about when we're talking about the city's future growth and development. You didn't hear it tonight, and certainly we'll be pulling out all these comments from the chat and processing them more outside of this meeting. Okay. Linda, do you see the comment in the chat about the safe streets? Because I think we might want to respond to that. There's a lot of money for transit improvement, but the feds require that the recipient show dedication to safe streets and Vision Zero, but the staff has publicly come out against. I don't
think that's a question I can necessarily answer. That is a public works decision from the Public Works Department. I think our goal is not, I don't think the plan was, and I don't want to misspeak out of turn. We are definitely trying to be as close to that as absolutely possible, but that policy has not been adopted by the city.
All right, well, we've gotten a couple good ideas here about more dedication to bike infrastructure, connectivity and safe multimodal access to the area south of 85 is badly needed. So thank you guys for your responses. I'll shift over to Anna.
Awesome, thank you, Ansley. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to shift gears over to character areas and more specifically corridors tonight. I'm going to go through a brief presentation just to get everybody on the same page of what we're talking about, and then we're going to jump in and start looking at some corridors. But like I said, to get everybody on the same page, Brookhaven's current comprehensive plan breaks the city down into character areas. These are, areas with a distinct sense of place, and they often follow neighborhood lines. And this is really to organize specific land use policy to guide future development. Thus far in the process, these character areas haven't really changed all that much, aside from aligning some of the boundaries with some other planning efforts to make sure that we're keeping the policies consistent. As it stands, specific land use policies for all of these character areas exist in several different policy documents. So this process is really an opportunity to consolidate those and make it a little bit easier to understand, as well as kind of take a deeper dive into these character areas and get some of that specific sub area within the character areas, right, and also just a little bit more nuanced. Again, like I said, these policies have existed in other documents. These sub areas that I'm talking about, interior, corridor, and transition, have also existed, but what was really missing was geographically defining these areas by parcel. So this is, like I said, going to take a deeper dive and really get things clearer so we understand where these policies apply. Next slide. So before we did that, we talked with the Planning Commission and gathered some feedback on how to properly identify or to define these sub areas. First is the interior. This is the heart of most character areas and are predominantly residential. They are the driving force behind how a character area feels and looks. Okay, and then next is the corridor. Pay attention to this one because this is what we're going to be talking about today. These are the main thoroughfares in a character area. These can range from regional arterials to more local roadways. Corridor policy is highly localized and dependent on location, traffic volumes, current land use, and development potential. Okay, and third are those transition areas. These kind of act as a step up or a step down between different land use intensities, but also different and distinct land uses. And finally, our fourth and newest sub area is the special use area. I believe Amanda mentioned this a little bit earlier. These are parts of character areas that don't really meet the rest of those categories, and they require specific policy guidance to their unique use. And these areas either require or may already have, a master plan or a small area plan. Okay. I'll give you an example just so we are all on the same page. This is La Vista Park, south of 85. You can see that, the interior, more residential part of the character area is defined as the interior. The corridors follow those major corridors: Sheridan Road, La Vista Road, Briarcliff. Transition is that corner you can see where Briarcliff Road and La Vista Road intersect. That is commercial, whereas the rest of the character area is predominantly residential, and it transitions to more intense commercial further east. And then finally, that special use area up at the top, that's where the Mexican consulate is. There's some apartments and it just and some other office buildings, kind of doesn't really fit the rest of the character area. So we think it requires a little bit more study. So like I said, we're going to take a deeper dive on corridors. We can't cover them all, but we're going to dive into some that are, I think, we have either some key questions or really important to the future development of Brookhaven. Okay, and a few things to keep in mind before we jump into our breakout group. There may be one corridor, but it might run through several different character areas. So there's going to be specific policy per character area for that one corridor. So for instance, we have North Druid Hills here that runs through 4 different character areas. And so policy is going to be different for all 4 of those little sections. Okay, and then what we're really going to be talking about tonight is, in terms of that future land use policy that I was talking about, we're going to be talking about residential intensity. So this kind of speaks to the intensity, but also the housing types that are that would be allowed in future rezoning. So this isn't going to change your zoning. It's just going to, if somebody has a piece of property and they're like, I want to develop something different here, let me look at the future land use policy to see what is appropriate and what I could possibly rezone to. And your city will use this document to kind of decide if this is a rezoning that fits with current policy. So here we have residential intensity. We're showing it on a sliding scale, one end being single family detached, your more traditional single family homes, all the way to multifamily. And in between, we have kind of some smaller kind of cottage court style single family houses, townhomes and live work units, as well as duplexes and triplexes. Some other land uses we'll be talking about to see if it's appropriate is mixed use. An example would be what is existing on Dresden, where there's commercial on the ground floor and then some apartments above. Neighborhood commercial is a small scale retail development like restaurants, lawns, coffee shops that kind of serve the surrounding residential neighborhood. They're not these big shopping centers. Community commercial would be more of that big shopping center with a grocery store and other retail needs. And then office, this one's a little bit tricky because it can really range in intensity, but it's the use we're kind of focusing on tonight. So an office could appear in, a former single family home like on Claremont Road, or it can be these big skyscrapers in Lenox Park. Some other land uses we'll consider are hotels, light industrial, institutional uses like schools, government buildings, churches, and then finally parks and recreation. Okay, so now we will be breaking out into one breakout group, correct? Okay, great.
Just one group. We'll stay here to keep it simple.
Great, perfect. So like I said, we're not going to be able to discuss all of the corridors, but just some that are super important to the future development of Brookhaven. And then if you come back to our workshops in March, we'll be able to cover not only all of the corridors, but all of the sub areas that I mentioned earlier. So let me share my screen so we can get into these breakout groups. Do we have any questions before we begin?